That's from the tech department, to let everybody know.
They'll leave some for everybody.
Bob, who has this?
I don't know, you guys have got to discuss that. Lori, you have to discuss that.
Oh, okay, we're gonna take it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, bring it to your record.
Open the meeting with pledge of allegiance. I'd like the minutes to reflect that we had an executive session prior to the meeting for personnel issues. Any comments on agenda items? Any comments on agenda items? None, okay. And the student spotlight, I'm thinking is...
Yeah, our student spotlight, they actually, but with the cancellation last Thursday, she wasn't sure she was gonna be able to make it here tonight, so if she shows up, I'll be able to introduce her.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Enrollments are there for your review. Number 6, approval of minutes.
Motion approved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Do you have a second from Holly? Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett?
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Widener?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes. Item 7, business and finance. Item
Motion approved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
1 through 6, is motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
Oh, Holly. Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Bennett?
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Widener?
I abstain on Tyler, no.
Mr. Farr?
Yes. Item 8, superintendent's report.
Did you do all of those?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so I'm asking for a motion to approve items 1 through 10 and item 1 on the supplemental agenda.
Motion approved is from superintendent.
Do you have a second? Discussion?
What's an E-rate consultant?
She writes our E-rate grant. Joe's here too, he can,
Oh, want to discuss that?
yeah.
Okay.
What's an E-rate?
Basically, we do for the last couple of years, the ever increase our E-rate consultants, who's also a lawyer, that we put in for every year, like, in my budget, I'll budget for like 57,000. Category 2's coming up this year, and the state will give us hopefully another 230,000 to be spent on technology. I do this every year and get back anywhere between 60,000 to 120,000. But this is a category 2, which we already did category 1 before, and it's a lot more money because it's done for the infrastructure, for switches, routers, access points. So this will give us a big boost. So it's basically getting $230,000 free from the state.
So Joe used money out of his budget to pay for this.
Thank you. Anything else? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Widener?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes.
The last item on the supplemental agenda is a presentation concerning substitute teachers, and the board had asked us to look into this, so Shane is going to help me along with Mary Jean to look at what we found when we took a deep dive into this issue. So on the outset, it may seem as though it would be pretty simple to solve this issue, but it really isn't. So we wanted to make sure that you have some information. So the simple simplest way to put it is the demand for substitutes outweighs the supply. Right now in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I heard on the radio the other morning that we're at the lowest unemployment rate that we've been in since the year 2000. So we're not the only district that is struggling with this. They are struggling to get folks who want to sign up for work. Essentially, people who want to work are working. And so we did an analysis of why teachers are out. 55% are sick days, 16% personal days, absence, leave of absence is 13%. We have a number of folks this year who have had major life events that have caused them to take a leave of absence. It's been unusual. Professional development, 6%, and field trips only 2%. So we approximated that we have about 14 teachers out a day. And again, some of those could be folks who have taken leave of absences, some of them are calling in sick, the majority are using sick days. Kelly Services manages to fill pretty consistently about 9 of those positions, which leaves a gap of 5 teachers. This is, again, we're doing averages, and we looked at a couple different payroll periods so that we didn't just take one data set. So the shortage is occurring across the country. The number of individuals with teaching certification or emergency certification has decreased. This is something that is a national crisis. One of the things that I wrote in my goals this year is to create a career pathway to teaching, because across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, across the United States, there is a shortage of teachers. We have a lot of difficulty filling. Why don't you use the example you used with me with the science teacher?
Yeah, we have a long-term position open in science, which is over 90 days, so they would get salary plus benefit. And we put advertised twice in the paper, I believe, online, and now we just did another on our website. We had 0 applications.
Right. And we struggled to fill a very special education, to get the right certification for a special education position also this year. So I want you to understand, it's not that Kelly Services just isn't getting their folks. There are not people out there that are looking for this kind of work.
Heather, what's our teaching staff number now? What's our total enrollment?
195. So we're able to cover some of the openings each day by implementing a checkerboard system. And basically, these are teachers who, on occasional days, will have a free period, and we can utilize them to fill in and substitute during the day. And we cover the remaining openings by dividing students between other classrooms. I want to defend that policy. All right, like I want you to understand, especially at the elementary level, it's probably better, rather than checkerboarding in all day long with a specials teacher and having first period have them in there teaching, trying to teach ELA to a kindergarten class. So it makes a lot more sense educationally if we're splitting kids up, because then they're being split up into rooms where there are certified teachers who are teaching the kindergarten curriculum and are doing it every single day. So while I know there's concerns about it in the community, I also know it is probably the best practice, providing that we're able to split them low enough. So those are the 2 ways that we're covering internally right now. So we can increase the supply by working to optimize those free periods better. And we can increase the daily, or we could increase the daily rate for subs to attract more people, maybe. We evaluate the impact of quarter days off for appointments to reduce time away from the classroom. Currently, right now, if a teacher wants to take time for an appointment, they take a half day. So maybe we could look at quarter days. That might help. And some of the districts use, again, a tiered pay system. So if you sub so many days, then your pay rate goes up. I want to show you, and then reduce the demand is the other option. Evaluate the time away from the classroom and develop strategies to minimize. So these are the substitute rates currently that Kelly Services is paying, or that these districts are paying around. So let me just, I want you to understand that when mechanic sets their sub rate at $85, when the sub gets their paycheck, it's the equivalent of $85. We actually pay Kelly Services about $136, okay? 85 of which goes to the sub.
115.
I'm sorry.
36% markup.
30,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
36% markup.
Okay, 150, so it's a 36% markup. You can see that Abington Heights is 80, Blue Ridge is 90, Carbondale 100, Blackwater Trail 90, 85 for the Lakeland, Scranton pays 90, Valley View pays 80. So while it might seem as though the logical solution would be to raise our sub rate, I want you to understand this is a very complex issue. And if we raise our sub rate and we don't get any more subs, okay, it doesn't help. And it costs the district more money than we're already paying. So I asked, Shane and I tried to tweak and we tried to talk through all of our questions surrounding these issues. And so she came up with this spreadsheet, and I'm going to let her explain it to you because it shows you sort of where the 0 point is, where it all evens out, providing that we get more subs. So there's that. Okay.
So there's a lot of numbers up here, so let me just take a couple seconds to provide you with a little bit of background, because in order to develop a model like this, you really have to make some assumptions about how you think about absences and how we're paying for the people who are covering in the classrooms. So the first assumption is we are averaging about 14 teacher absences per day. So that's number one. Number two is the assumption that current state, we have Kelly Services filling approximately 9 of those positions, and as a district, we are figuring out combinations of ways to cover those remaining 5. So if you look at this graph up here, what you see in this first set of blocks is our current scenario. So you see over on the left-hand side, that's $85 per day scenario, that's current state. That is what a substitute is paid to work in our district through Kelly Services. And what you can see across the top is the fill rate. That represents the percentage of positions that Kelly Services is able to fill for us. So that column that you see that's kind of grayed out there is kind of like the best estimate of our current situation. They are filling roughly 64% of our positions on a daily basis, okay? 9 out of the 14. So you can see here, the 9, that represents the ones that are filled by the service. 5 represents how we're covering in the district. This number here, the 1044, that basically is looking at 9 positions a day. We're paying Kelly Services $116 for each of those positions, okay? So that's really what that column represents there. It takes a little bit more to get to some assumptions on how we are covering the costs for internally in the district, okay? Because there are several ways that we're covering those openings on a day-to-day basis. So in many cases, we have the ability to use administrative periods where teachers have some flexibility and some availability to be able to move into a classroom to be able to provide support. In other cases, we have to use things such as prep periods, or when we move kids into another classroom, double up, and there is compensation for a teacher who has more than their normal students for the day. And that's what's represented here. It is approximately $144 per position per day to be able to do that. There is also a markup that you have to take into consideration because we also have to pay retirement and Social Security and benefits when we take that kind of an approach. So what that represents here is a combination of those different calculations at each of those different fill rates from, say, 64%, which is where we're at today, up to, say, 100% if Kelly Services was able to cover all of those. What you see in each of the subsequent boxes is what would happen if we start to increase the daily rate that we would pay through Kelly Services. So in this scenario, the second block, this is a $90 per day scenario. So if we were to increase the daily rate to a substitute to $90, we still have to pay the markup to Kelly Services. We then begin paying Kelly Services $122 versus currently $116. Similarly, if we look at this scenario, if we were to bump it to $100 a day, which is what we would pay a substitute, again, you still have the markup that you would pay Kelly Services. We would then be paying Kelly Services $136 a day in order to be at the $100 rate to the teachers. So what this does is shows a comparison. And in this second block, you'll see that this shows what the daily average increase would be of adjusting the daily rate in each of those scenarios. So, for example, if we increased the rate to $90 a day, but we got no more bites, so Kelly's still able to only fill 9 of those 14 slots a day, we would be paying an additional $54 a day as a district, times 180 days throughout the course of the school year. Again, this is based on some averages and some assumptions, but you can see how it translates throughout. So what this shows here is at that 90-day rate, or $90 per day scenario, we would not start to see a benefit, a cost benefit, until Kelly Services filled roughly low 80% of our positions. Which, you know,
At least.
yeah, that would be at least 3 additional subs per day. So we're saying that if we were to increase the rate from 85 to 90, in order for us to kind of reach a break-even point, we would need to attract an additional 3 subs per day into the district. And really, that ultimately, you have to take some educated decision-making in that process to say whether or not you really feel like that's possible. Given the other factors that we've talked about, including what's going on in the total marketplace in terms of substitute and certified teacher availability. I'm not going to go through each of these columns. You can look at it. Please check the math, because maybe you'll find something that we've overlooked. We've gone through these numbers several times. But again, this just kind of is a model to help us kind of collectively look at how changes could affect out-of-pocket costs. Because again, changing the rate does not necessarily mean that we will get more subs. It could be a strategy of a many-tiered approach in order for us to really try to close that gap and have more teacher availability so that the teacher-to-student ratio stays in the range where we really want it to be. Are there any questions? I know there's a lot of numbers on here, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, the approximate 9 individuals per day that Kelly's able to provide for us.
Right.
Do we know where they're coming from? For example, are they people in the district, or would there possibly be a benefit to giving an incentive for people who are out of the district that we'd be able to offer just them more, or is that not
That's a great
something
question.
that could even happen?
So that would get into one of the things that we will discuss that we don't have a lot of firsthand data is a tiered approach. So that would be kind of like another way to approach a tiered structure. We would have to engage in some conversations with Kelly Services to see how they would be able to structure that if that was something that we wanted to look into. I'll definitely take that one back so that we can take that into consideration. I will tell you that I would say at least, I mean, we have building principals here, they can speak to this probably better than I can, but I would say that at least half of those substitutes are relatively local, I would say.
Which
I
makes
see
sense.
a couple head nods, I see a couple head nods, yeah. And so I know some of them personally, so that's how I can speak to that, but others, you know, I'm just not as familiar. But I will tell you that of the 9, I would say 75 to 80% of them are repeat substitutes on a fairly regular basis in the district. I see a lot of heads nodding. So people who have, you know, some history with the district, maybe have children in the district, maybe have, you know, some good rapport with teachers that they substitute for, you know, and have built relationships with over time. Okay? Yes.
Have we looked into, there was a question about how the process for Kelly, to be hired by Kelly to do this. Have we looked into that process to see if it's as cumbersome as some reports are indicating, or if it's maybe not so cumbersome?
So Mary Jean and Heather can probably speak to this a little bit more. We participated in a meeting with Kelly Services, I would say maybe about 4 weeks after the start of school, right around there. And the representative who was there walked us through the process. There is an online application process. So for some people that is cumbersome, but I will tell you that based on personal experience, an online application process is fairly standard in today's marketplace. It is fairly time consuming because there are certainly aspects of it that ask you to walk through employment history, which, you know, can take you some time when you're starting to think about what your employment history has been. There is required training for individuals who have emergency certification. So for people who do not have direct classroom experience, they are required to go through some training. But I think that we, at least I'm speaking for myself, I can say that I personally felt that it would be beneficial for somebody to truly understand what it means to be in the classroom.
So a retired teacher would not have to do this?
That's correct. So my understanding is retired teachers do not have to have that component of the training as part of the Kelly Services process. I see heads nodding. Carolyn is nodding. Mary Jean's nodding. I have that correct, right? Okay. But to my knowledge, beyond that, there really isn't a lot more. There are things like mandatory reporter training that is required of all teachers going into the classroom, and that is time consuming.
So that would be required whether it's Kelly or...
Absolutely. That would be required for anyone, regardless of the process, and that can take 3 hours. And so, yes, agreed, 3 hours approximately. And so I do think that to some people, that is something that they've not necessarily perhaps had to do in the past. If you go back 10, 15 years, that training may not have been a part of the regular process of subbing. So it may be perceived that that's a Kelly Services issue, but the reality is that's a requirement of the
training increased?
I'm sorry, say that again.
That training increased a couple years ago?
I would not be able to answer that. Do you know if
Did
the
it increase?
Yeah, the requirements. I know we increased requirements for volunteers and background checks of teachers
Yeah,
a couple years ago. Did this training come about a similar time period?
yes.
So that
That's
was
all
kind of,
indication.
before we had Kelly, that wasn't necessarily in place, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know the exact timing of it.
But since we've had Kelly, it's come in place.
The
so
Affordable Care Act was the impetus for going to outside agencies, and that happened across the Commonwealth, and then there were changes to the child reporting.
I mean, it may appear to some people that
Right.
it's only with Kelly that this came about, but
Yes.
it just happened to be some time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So it would have gone about regardless.
Right.
So we did.
Craig had a question.
And I know you've alluded to this, and at the previous meeting you mentioned about possibly looking at other companies,
Yes.
employment services.
Yes.
Are you gonna talk about that, or
Yeah,
haven't you had a
that's on the
chance?
next slide.
Okay.
And we're still doing that research. There is another, Shane's reached out to them a couple times, but there's another company that also does this. We're not sure that they do it for this area. So I'm not really sure that there's another game in town, but we are looking into that.
Source for Teachers is one of the other organizations. Now, when we transitioned to Kelly Services, I think it was about 3 years ago, at that time, Source for Teachers was predominantly Northern Tier. So the closest school that they were servicing, I think, was maybe, say, Wyalusing. And then everything was west of there. So it was definitely a very distinct geography that they were servicing. So the question that we've put out to them is, have they expanded their territory where it would make it possibly feasible to support a district like Tunkhannock? Would we be way on the eastern edge of what would be reasonable? And also looking at things like exclusivity to understand, does that have to be a full transition, or are there ways to look at something that would be hybrid to try to look at another provider that way?
Thanks.
When I look at this and I look at other districts that were on that list, like Abington and Scranton area, I don't think increasing our rate necessarily by $5, which is where the break-even point is, if we can get 3 subs, is necessarily going to lure somebody here from the Scranton School District, $5 more to drive here. I don't believe that that's the case. So we have a couple different options and recommendations. So we know that the demand outweighs the supply, and we understand, having done this analysis, that this is a fairly complex issue. It's not like a real simple solution that's going to jump out and say, oh yeah, pick me. So we're going to have to continue to work on it. An increase in the substitute compensation rate will increase expenses in the district, it may increase the number of subs. But we know for sure that even if it doesn't, you know, if we up the sub rate, it's gonna increase our costs.
Do we know what the sub rate, do
I'm sorry?
we know what the sub fill rates are for the other districts on the list?
For the other districts,
Yes.
I don't off the top of my head, but we can see if Kelly will share some of that. I mean, anecdotally, they have shared that it's comparable. I mean, so, you know, they have said that as a district, we're like in the hunt, you know, like they wouldn't describe us as an outlier district in terms of fill rate or absenteeism or, you know, any of those kinds of things. They would say that we're, you know, kind of middle of the pack.
So even at $100 a day, they're not, school districts are not,
Right.
It's not like they're
Exactly.
necessarily, correct.
They're not,
not getting 100%, but.
so, again, we can look at time off procedures for teachers, we can have that discussion, we can look at ways to optimize our scheduling, and see if that can help address the gap, although I really feel like, you know, we're doing that on a day-to-day basis, and then we can evaluate other providers, and we can evaluate a tiered pay system, and whether or not that would have any impact. But that's where we are right now. This is a complex issue. And no clear, like, simple solution has emerged from this analysis.
Is there an easy way, like short of you or Mary Jean or Shane sitting and calling other school districts? Like, is there like a listserv where you could check and see what other school districts are saying as far as, if Kelly was just kind of being vague about saying we're in the middle somewhere, to get an idea of where our absenteeism and our fill rate is compared to other districts?
I will tell you that they have said that our absenteeism, that there are other districts who have a higher absenteeism rate and that are struggling more than we are. Right.
We fall below the national average. I mean, so if you were to do like, you know, look around and, you know, see what some of the industry norms are. I mean, I think that at the time that we did this several years ago, some of the data that I saw was that we were in the 9 to 10% range. And the data would say that we're, you know, a little less than that. If we have 195 teachers in the district and we're averaging about 14 teachers per day absent, you know, that would say that we are still in that, you know, 8 to 10% range, roughly.
And we know pretty much every day that we're going to be short at least 5 because we have at least that many that are out in some kind of a long-term leave, right? Or something like that. Like that number includes the ones that we have already figured are out.
Yes,
Yes,
it does include
it
those.
does include those,
It
right.
does include those. And like we said, it's just been a very difficult year for some folks.
Yeah.
Unusually difficult.
Well, working together, how far ahead can we plan to let a sub know that we would need them? I can tell you years ago, people down in my area who were subbed Dallas, Lehman, and Tunkhannock, and some of the other schools let them know farther ahead than what Tunkhannock did.
If
It
we
was feast
know,
or famine.
right, if we know, then it's put into the Kelly services, and then they can sign up for those things, so they can see all of the vacancies that we know about. Correct?
Yes, the
Okay.
teachers put them in.
Right.
So if they're scheduling a day off for personal or for
Yeah,
some
sure.
particular reason.
Right. Then that would be in there in
in
advance.
there.
Yeah.
If they're sick that morning, they're not gonna know.
Unless it's a scheduled appointment. I mean,
Yeah.
so there are examples of that. I mean, the other thing that, you know, and part of this is built into taking a deeper dive into the schedule optimization piece because some of those incidents are half days. So while it says 14 absences or whole, you know, out of teachers that are out per day, some of those are half-day incidents. And so part of it is also trying to figure out, you know, if you go into that system and you're a substitute, chances are you're going to put in for a full-day opportunity before you're going to put in for a half-day opportunity. Are there ways? Yeah, Craig, you can, you know, so.
I'll wait.
So, you know, I think that by looking at whether or not there are other options that would allow us to secure a full-day substitute potentially, I think that there are some opportunities there. Because I definitely, when you look at the data, you know, while there may be 14, you might have 2 of those that might be half-day requests. And that 9 times out of 10 is somebody scheduling an appointment.
Well, it's cheaper to have somebody here for a whole day and have it turn out we don't need them for half of it than it is to have teachers covering other classrooms, right? Am I saying that right?
It is, yes. So you're saying, would it make more sense to do it that way?
Like
I would
schedule
say
every sub full day, maybe that would make them more inclined to wanna take those and.
possibly. Now, that would require some work with Kelly, because I don't know that that's how it goes entered into the system. Because you would have to create some way that you would have an override. So like, if I need a half day in the morning, you know, in the system, if I am actually, if Mary Jean's looking for a substitute opportunity that day, she would see that as a full day opportunity. That's a great question. I mean,
That's
so.
actually a really good
But
idea.
if I can get, if I can have a teacher and that classroom teacher for that child can be there half a day, I want them to be there half a day. I don't want to
No, no.
encourage people to.
What
take-
she's
No, that's
saying
what
is,
I'm saying.
like,
Yeah.
so we think about, we know what that number is, so it's gonna vary between 5 and 20, depending on what day of the week it is. Like, we should always schedule full-day subs, because there's always gonna be a call-in that we don't
Right.
expect, which is going to result in split classrooms and other teachers covering. And so that may not be a long-term solution,
Right.
but if we're more likely to get coverage for a full day, we should just take them, and if we're not using that sub, give them something else to do.
How does it appear at Kelly Services if we have a teacher takes a half day in the morning and one takes a half day in the afternoon?
So that's a great question. So not having been on the side of being a substitute, I don't know what they see. So the other step, the other piece that could kind of piggyback off of what you're saying is there a way to match half-day absences where you know somebody in the morning is off, somebody in the afternoon is off, and if I'm a substitute, I see that as one full-day substitute opportunity potentially. It's a great question. I mean, so I captured this half-day as full-day piece, and I think that's something that we could look at in more detail, for sure.
I think that they can see it that way. You guys correct me
Okay.
if I'm wrong.
Half and half.
You can see it, you could schedule 2 halves already.
Yeah, we have people that do that,
Yeah,
because I'll
okay.
talk to somebody and say, hey, like last year especially, if I had to go down to the health trust or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
say, hey, you know, Ms. McClurg, you in this day? Well, I'm in the morning for this person, but I'm not in the afternoon. I
Yeah.
said, okay, so then I just request her for the afternoon.
Right.
So the half and half. Now, I did want to comment on 2 things though, other than that, if I may.
Yeah, please.
One thing that I personally would appreciate, and I think that general teaching staff would agree with, is that quarter days, if we could get down to something like that with Kelly, as long as Kelly can split it into quarters, would be something that would absolutely be desirable.
I think so.
Especially for the beginning of the day and the end of the day for appointments, for example, because I don't like to miss half days. That's just me personally speaking, but I'm pretty sure that we would have good agreement on that one.
So like, can we like do that tomorrow? I mean, you know what I'm saying, like.
We need to
so-
talk, we can talk to Kelly tomorrow.
Right, you know what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
because if the association's agreeable to it, you know, out of all the ideas on it, that's something we're not doing today. The other things might move the needle, and might cause some other problem we don't anticipate.
Well,
That's one if we can,
and the other thing I just wanted to mention was if you do, this is the bad part of that, when you do stick people in 4 different placements during the day, sometimes the substitute teachers, from speaking with them, don't like to do that, of course,
Right.
and that is a turnoff. However, as long as you get the right group who are okay with committing to coming in for the day, like you said, and you can get a quarter here, half here, and then the end of the quarter.
so can we look at a tiered system, anybody that does the quarter subs gets a +10 for the day, or like, this is what I'm saying, if we do something like that, it is a pain in the rear end, definitely.
Well, as
So-
long as Kelly can split it into fourths, if you can find that out, I don't know. I definitely know the half days they do.
But even if you can't entice somebody to take that, our building administrators are a lot more likely to be able to checkerboard 2 periods, right? Using admin periods than they are
That's
Quarter
right.
day.
That's correct.
Right.
And then that, and ideally, then, you know, if you go back a couple slides, you know, what is kind of meant by this in parentheses here, well, that's really what we see as the potential opportunity of implementing each of those strategies. So what in essence that would do, you know, is potentially free up one of your existing 9 subs to go cover one of those gap holes, if you will, because you figured out an easier way internally to cover those 2-hour blocks, you know, that you would allow for a quarter day off.
Yeah, your 14 would be, you know, 11.75.
Yeah, that's exactly
Split up
right.
all over the place.
Right.
and,
Right,
Because I'm not sure, I'm sure it's not tied to payroll, but if every time a teacher was gonna take a half a day for anything, if we just put it in as a full day and so the sub was signing up for the full day and then we put them where we needed them, because if we're short that many subs on any given day,
Right.
we'll have a place for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I captured, to see if there's a way to do that.
Trying to think about the other things we used to do for absenteeism, and like, I'm not sure any of it works, but there used to be incentive programs and things like that, so I don't know what that looks like, but I remember people who would never miss work because they would want that.
Yep.
So that's something else, I don't have a good idea, I don't have data on whether that was successful or not.
Yep, and I would say that that's kind of in this reduce the demand portion here, where we would look at how do we minimize time away. One way you minimize time away is to encourage people to be here in a different way than we currently are. And there's many different ways that you can look at incentives to do that. And so that is definitely something that, we want to evaluate.
I did do a little research on that, John, and I had two different scales,
Yeah.
but we didn't include that in the analysis because the analysis was getting pretty deep on us.
Right, there's a lot of information
Yeah.
already.
So, yeah.
So I think there's room there, and now I remember what I used to do with me is we get them like a $25 gift card there, recognized in front of the module leadership team. So if we ended up having some sort of a way to do something like that, maybe.
I've done quarterly drawings, so everybody who has, a certain performance, in terms of absenteeism, hey, perfect attendance, your name goes in, and then there's, drawings for certain things.
Those are the days though, P&G encourage you to come no matter how sick you were though. That's changed a little bit.
Yeah. All right, so we'll continue to look at,
Yeah.
we'll continue to look at some of the things that have been brought up here and to research them. But that's where we are right now.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of other things I wanted to mention at the end of my report. I did want to mention that UGI has, or Lindy, we're not sure which, has been on the property and has set some stakes and done some painting and whatnot. We never did have a right-of-way agreement, so we have been in touch with our attorney, and the attorney is trying to reach out to UGI to see what's going on. I just wanted to keep you apprised of that was going on. All the air quality testing for Evans Falls and Mill City has come back clear finally, so those buildings are set to be appraised, and that John is working on that now, getting those appointments set up. Let's see. So the Future Ready Index, I wanted to mention this to you. This is the Pennsylvania's new system of looking at schools and are they meeting the mark and whatnot. Mary Jean and I got notified this week that there's a potential that the high school has met, and you're going to be able to tell me this, say exactly what it is. It's a targeted, meaning one of the subgroups did not make the progress and did not hit the mark. At the same time, I want you to be patient with us because we have resubmitted our data to PDE and we are questioning their figures. So we're in a dialogue with them right now. So I'm not sure the way this is going to turn out. They're going to release the results of what they have, and so it may appear as though we missed one of our target groups at the high school. I'm not sure that that's accurate, and so we're working with them to try to resolve where the differences in our measurements are and the differences in theirs, and I just wanted to let you know that. So just be patient, because the first figures that came out might not be the last figures that come out. So I wanted
Did they change this method of evaluating schools like every 3 years? It feels
yeah,
that way.
it happens, yeah.
Feels that way.
So after No Child Left Behind, they had the SPP score, and
Yeah.
now we have this. So honestly, I think it's going to be a good thing for us. I really think we're going to get credit for a lot of things that we're doing already, and I'm not negative about it at all. But this first round, we're all new at it, So we all have to figure out how they're capturing the data that they're using and whatnot, and make sure that we're entering our data in correctly. And we're in the process of doing that, and just clarifying it. You guys had asked me to set up a meeting with John Audie. He's gonna be in town on Wednesday night because we have a variance meeting with the borough. And so I think there were some questions about communication. And so if you want to continue to have that meeting, I know Carolyn had canvassed you, then I just need confirmation so I can get back to him about what time he needs to be here at 5 o'clock. Is that still of interest to the board?
Sure.
Yes? Okay. All right, so I will confirm that with the meeting. And
I
John,
think if we do that, we need all 9 board members present though.
okay,
Meaning, like, I don't think it's helpful to do that meeting if we have 5 or 6 of us there. You know
I don't
what
think we're gonna have Carolyn know.
No,
You know, you said, like, 'cause there was questions around what should or shouldn't be communicated, who's supposed to be communicating those things. And I just, to do it with a few people, I think we're not gonna get the essence of what people are looking for.
Okay, so I will,
I think we've got to balance it though between having the meeting happen and not, because I'm not sure all parties
Right.
are gonna put it at the same priority or I might, so.
So I
the
won't,
pleasure of the board, but guess what?
I wonder if we couple that with what we've been talking around the next retreat timing.
That was my next one.
Yeah, so,
Okay,
though I actually don't think that that's in the best interest to have that discussion with John at the same time. So,
I can see if John can come up maybe before the next board meeting, or,
I think that might be a good
Okay.
idea.
all right, I'll try to schedule a different date with him, okay? And then,
Oh, which might be, because the reorg is,
that's usually short.
that's short, so that might be the best time to do it.
Okay, I'll try to get him. And then, John had also in discussion was, doing, like a
Retreat,
retreat.
you gotta call it the right thing, right?
Okay. I don't know, that's.
Like a team
Sounds like a
building.
lot more fun than it's going to be. So anyhow, but when you guys are interested in doing that, so we can start getting some dates around for that. And again, I think that needs to be a date where everybody,
Yes.
I agree with, everybody needs to be at that one.
Right.
So, I don't know whether you want to send me some dates, or,
Soon are we talking?
So,
I would think January.
Okay, perfect.
yeah,
so January, what we did last time was we started like at 3 or 4, we went like, was that 3 or 4 hours?
No, I think we started a little later than that, unless we did it on a weekend, because I don't remember
Definitely
taking off,
didn't.
I didn't take it off of work, and I don't get out of work until like 3:30, so.
Okay, so we
I think we
started
started
at
at 5.
4 or 5.
It needs to be 5.
Maybe
week.
4?
It would be close. But you could start counting.
No, I don't know.
How about 4:30? Go in the range.
4:30 is probably a possibility.
okay.
So then let's send what days were available to Carolyn then, is that?
That'll be fine.
Well, bless her. Say like 4:30 to
8:30
8:30
in the month of January.
in January.
Okay.
With John's schedule, it might be better to get his open dates first.
No, we're saying this is just us.
I'm just.
Rowdy, we're talking about before the next board meeting possibly.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Any committee meetings that I'm not aware of? I didn't think there were, but I want to check. New business, the recent count is in the review. And we have first reading on attachment on procurement, revision of attachment on procurement, federal programs to board policy, number 626, and the first reading of purchases subject to bid / quotation, number 610. Then 4, we have looking for resolution to approve payment application number 5 for renovation projects. Now, is this the final payment?
These are final payments.
These are the final for the bonds.
And is everything satisfactory?
Yes, yes, and I think after a believe it was 2 meetings ago. There had been a few questions. Since that time, Bill has scheduled time with John Chapolsky, the facilities director. They did a walkthrough. They had a few items that had been a part of the original punch list that they reviewed for completion. You know, I won't speak for Bill, but I know that John was satisfied that those things had been completed, so that was an additional step that we had taken.
That's correct.
Yep.
And, yeah, this here, I was talking to Walt Dana last week, and this is for the bond issue type thing. This will be the final payments.
Correct.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the resolutions?
Motion approved.
Shane?
Second.
And Bill. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold,
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett,
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory,
Yes.
Mr. Widener,
Yes.
Mr. Fark.
Yes. Looking for a resolution to be adopted to approve payment application number 6 for renovation projects. Is there a change order?
So that had actually been in the middle of some of the activity through the summer, so that was just one final payout that had come through. That was a change order for some duct work that was moved through the project.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second?
Second. That's Holly.
Did I get that wrong last time?
Yes,
That's
that's all
all
right,
right.
because we both, you know, we were both on board.
Sorry about that. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold,
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett,
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory,
Yes.
Mr. Widener,
Yes.
Mr. Fark.
Yes. Number 6, motion for resolution to be adopted to approve affiliation site agreement with the University of Scranton.
Motion approved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold,
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett,
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory,
Yes.
Mr. Widener,
Yes.
Mr. Fark.
Yes. And number 7, looking for approval for overnight field trip to the winter of PMEA, All State Festival and Conference, Pittsburgh.
Motion approved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold,
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett,
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory,
Yes.
Mr. Widener,
Yep.
Mr. Fark.
Yes. Anything else from the board? Any other public comments, questions, discussions, game shows?
I've gotten a lot of good feedback over the idea of the possibility of having 3-hour delays. That was a huge hit amongst parents because while it might not have been effective on Friday because of how bad things were.
We'll see how effective it is.
Yeah, the hope is that there
I
were some
don't know.
days last year that could have been helped by it and that maybe that'll happen this year,
I
so.
hope so. We're ready. We're ready to try it.
No, we're not. No, sir.
Yeah, no.
No more stuff. That would be great.
Other questions from the audience? Okay, the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.